Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're just going to wait another minute or so and make sure that we get everybody in that's trying to get in. So just bear with us for a couple more minutes here. All right, it looks like most people have gotten in. So I just want to say welcome and thank you so much for joining us. This is, again, we're rounding the near end of celebration. So we thank you for your continued support attending the 2021 virtual celebration. Again, we're using the platform Zoom webinar today. So you as the participants, your camera and mic are not going to be active. But if you go to the very middle of your bar, you're going to see the Q&A button. Please feel free to type in your questions during the presentation. If something comes up and you don't want to forget, type it away and we'll get to those at the end of the presentation. And again, you have the chat feature right there in the middle too. Please feel free to use both of those to be interactive with today's presentation. So with that, Matt Robotham is going to take the lead now.
Thanks. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to Map Tools, Understanding and Mapping Private Property Boundaries. I'm Matt Robotham. I'm the GIS Program Manager at the NCTA. So a quick little overview of what we're going to be talking about today. The primary focus of the subject matters is going to be geared towards trail planning, but I do think there is some usefulness if you're just a trail user or hiker. And I want to point out at the end, I want to do kind of two separate Q&A sessions immediately after the presentation. Any questions about what I talked about related to mapping property data, and then we'll open it up. And if you've brought any just general map questions about mapping on the North Country Trail or anything like that, I'll be glad to field those as we can. So a little a background, some terminology. So Geographic Information Systems, or GIS. GIS is a computer software used by the NCTA to produce maps and run analysis. So GIS, I like to think of it as kind of one part graphic design and one part database management. And when we're talking about digital property data, we're talking, land ownership and property boundary information. And this is generally compiled at the county level. So counties in the United States kind of function as the authoritative source of this information. Some major cities may do this as well, but ultimately this information in general is compiled at the county level. And this is because it's used as the basis for property tax assessment. But then of course, there's a bunch of other useful planning purposes for this information. So in the late 1990s, many states authorized their local governments to charge a fee for this information. This information, typically might have been referred to as like public access information, publicly available. And in general, you can still go down to a local government office and you can see this information. But to actually get access to it, they began to charge a fee for it. And these fees were used to supplement the funding for these new GIS departments that were starting up. So historically, this paywall has been a pretty significant hurdle for NCT planning efforts. When I first started at this, we just had a very difficult time getting access to parcels. And then if we could get them, there was generally a fee associated with each individual parcel we wanted to look at. So more recently, a trend has developed towards freely available statewide parcel layers, and this is meant to encourage development. And currently, 2 of the NCT hosting states offer a statewide parcel layer, Wisconsin and Vermont. In other states like Michigan, for example, the legislation has to actually be undone that authorize these municipalities to to charge a fee, and they've essentially built a whole like county department around this fee structure. And so they have to work this out with the states, both legislatively and, financially, of how they're gonna, continue to process this information in the future. But in addition to that, many counties individually offer direct access to parcel information. And that's what we're going to take a look at first here. So Kent County in Michigan, where the Lowell, the NCTA headquarters is a really good example to look at this for. They've been at this for a long time, and they have a pretty great set of online resources. So kind of with the growth in online mapping platforms, things like Google Maps and all of that, many counties began publishing this tax parcel information as part of their own online mapping systems. So what we'll do here is take a look at Kent County's system. So this is their basic GIS webpage. You'll generally find this information at your county either under their GIS department or under the tax and equalization department, the assessment office. Those are usually pretty closely wed together. But here we're going to pull it up under the GIS website. So we're going to go down here to this link. And now I'm going to basically launch the online viewer. And then we're going to look at a couple properties just south of the Lowell office. So essentially, this is a countywide parcel fabric, they call it. It's all the parcels in the county. And not only does it have, the visual boundaries represented on a map, but then you can click on each individual parcel and it'll bring up that database site of GIS and allow us to see owner name, owner address, which can be useful if you want to make contact, things like that. So here's a City of Lowell property. The trail is actually routed through here. And then right next to it is kind of an interesting parcel. This is a parcel owned by Mid-Michigan Railroad, and it kind of surrounds this active rail bed here in Lowell. Pretty obvious if you're out there on the ground, you can see that this is an active rail line. But just south of here, there's some places where this type of ownership, although it is the real ownership of the property, the use on the ground doesn't make it as obvious. So if your county has online mapping, it's a great resource. It may have it, it may not. And in addition to that, or as the only source of information, they may offer this data as a download option. So here we're back to Kent County's GIS website. And we're going to open their GIS data library. So this information is primarily useful for NCTA staff because we have GIS software to use this data in. So if you came upon this in your planning efforts, this is something you can direct your regional trail coordinator to or me to. Basically what we do, so we open it up, download a file for the City of Lowell, and then what we're going to do is add this into our mapping system at NCTA. So we call this kind of our basic project map. Many of you have probably seen this template. So we can just produce a simple map like this for you, or we can, use the information in a number of other planning processes. In addition to just the parcel information and of course our trail information, though, we have some other useful stuff we can add in. Like in this property in particular, wetlands is a pretty key issue with this property. So you can see that I've added wetlands here and that appears on the map. Additionally, we have elevation contours, forest covers is something that we look at in North Dakota occasionally. Rivers, streams, all the basic stuff, roads. And then additionally, we have some pretty decent satellite imagery that we have nationwide access to. So we can produce these sort of maps pretty simply for pretty much anywhere on the trail. And any of these maps that NCTA staff produces can be used in the fields with the Avenza app as a geospatial PDF. So you're essentially loading that map that I was just showing on the screen onto the iPad that Bill Mankey is holding here, and that allows you to track your location on the map when you're out in the field. So very useful if you're working with like a landowner or some other partner on the ground. Our regional trail coordinators use this all the time to show exactly where you're at in relationship to like the property boundaries or other features on the ground that might be of interest. So these online mapping systems are extremely useful for our trail planning efforts. You're very lucky if the county you're working in has one. And I'd say, just kind of a subjective assessment, about 50% of the projects that land on my desk, the county we're working in has this type of resource. So there's still plenty of counties out there, even in this day and age, that aren't offering direct access like this to their information. Although the growth in this has just been, exponential over like the past 10 or more years. And again, the counties are kind of like the authoritative data source. We're going to talk about another source next, but they're not the primary keepers of this data. So a couple of years ago, a software product came out called Onyx Maps, and this has really improved the capacity of our mapping in working with private property information. So I'm just going to play a quick little video about Onyx Maps. It's kind of commercially, but it gets the point across pretty well what this software can do for us.
Welcome to Onyx Hunt. A new way to hunt and access land is right at your fingertips. See clearly labeled landowner names and property boundaries. Explore more national and state forests, BLM, and other public lands you never knew existed. Discover possible access lands so you can find lands open to public hunting in your state. See terrain, access points, water data, and more with a tap of your finger. Our land experts collect data and work in collaboration with different entities, giving you more access and knowledge while in the field. Available only on the Hunt app, switch between 3 base maps that provide satellite imagery, topographic detail, and a hybrid of the two. Quickly drop custom waypoints when and wherever you want. View maps on phone, tablet, computer, and GPS while syncing waypoints, tracks, and more. No service? No problem. Save maps for offline use so you can always see exactly where you stand, even out of reception. App memberships also include chip updates for your GPS unit, ensuring you have the latest maps available. Choose between a single state premium membership or explore the entire country with our 50-state elite membership. Get the most accurate and expansive hunting maps in the palm of your hands. Get started today.
All right. So yeah, I would encourage any of you who are doing any sort of work with private property to look into Onyx. They do offer a free trial, and I would highly recommend that you try the free trial for your area because, like parts of the Eastern UP, they just don't have complete information. In general, we've found this company seems to be very Western centric. So they're in Montana. They're very focused on. They started as like a hunting company out west, so they're very focused on the Western states. We've noticed about a year lag in, for example, like if property changes hands in Michigan, it takes about a year to see that new property owner's name show up. But in general, the boundaries are all there and it's fairly useful. Again, it's not an authoritative source like your county would be, but being that it's a statewide layer, it's amazingly useful. So I'd encourage you to check out the free trial, and then most folks would just need the one state membership, which is reasonable, $30 a year, something that the chapter can easily afford. So Onyx allows you to work with property data and a number of other useful layers through your internet browser. So it's that seamless statewide data that's really useful, especially in multi property regions. So I've got kind of the area south of Lowell here. I've zoomed out of that city property that we were looking at, and we've got a whole stretch of on-road trail that will need to be developed through an active planning effort to get it off-road. So something like Onyx really gives you some insight into the ownership situation. Regardless of, in this area here, we're skipping into a different county. We're jumping into Berry County from Kent County. We may want to dip over to the east into Ionia County for a second. So, there's 3 counties worth of data just right at your fingertips. And then getting back to the individual property data, which is generally how we're working with properties, their topographical base map and satellite imagery provide a great amount of detail. And then this service is available, both on your desktop, but also, like the video said, on your mobile device. And like Avenza, it allows you to track your location when you're out in the field, and it does have the offline option. So for all of you folks that are working in more remote areas, you don't have to worry about having cellular data signal. You can download this data to your device and use it in the field. So with that, I did want to touch a little bit on the limitations of what our mobile devices or our GPS units can do in the field. And I thought a good way to illustrate that would be a project we worked on earlier this year. We weren't able to, we knew we had some problems with the Kekakabek Trail up in Minnesota as far as the mileage was off a little, but we weren't sure where the problem was. So we basically ended up working with like 4 different consumer grade sourced GPS data sets. And you can see, here's kind of an example of, the data is all within like roughly 30 feet, but it's not exactly spot on. And that's okay for trails, kind of, although we want it a little more detailed than that. But this is just an illustration of kind of what these consumer grade units are going to give you. You're never going to have extreme precision with these, and they really don't have the ability to report out on how precise they're actually being. So I like to think of this 30 feet as kind of the limitation of these devices. So in instances where you are within maybe 30 feet of a property line, these consumer grade devices are not going to be what you want to solely rely on. You're going to want to either go out and do some ground truthing, or in a lot of cases, especially if it's any sort of easement or anything like that, a survey is going to be the more appropriate tool. So here's a picture where we had to bring the big dogs in literally. Renee there is pointing to the survey marker that we found, and then any of you that know Ed Morse there in the high vis green jacket, he's a retired surveyor, so he was actually the one out poking around in the woods originally and was able to find the survey marker out, and you can see the trails right. You can see the blue blazes on the tree there. The trail is right at this property line. So that was a situation where they needed to work with both the land manager, which is the DNR, where they're standing, and making sure that they've got some sort of objective indication of where this property line is. And really, one other point I wanted to make with that, get permission before you go out in the fields. Trespassing in Michigan is a misdemeanor offense in some cases. So the names of the innocent have been removed on this, but it can happen. So make sure you're, going through the appropriate process before you set foot on any private lands, even if you're just scouting and things like that. It's really important, both, because it's the law, and it just, makes us a good, good trail organization. And, it's, we don't want any bad reputation getting out there about the way we do things. So that is really the part of what I had to say about private property data. If we have any questions specifically about that, I'd like to take those. Or, I think it's also useful if you can share any experiences that you've had, working with private property data, like what have been some successful avenues you've gone down for getting this information, or what have been some challenges, things like that. Yeah, so Connie was saying in her remote area in Western EP, they don't get this information updated quite often. So yep, that's not only your area, also parts of fortunately, Connie, you've got a pretty simple land ownership information in your area. We have a similar situation in parts of like Ohio, for example, where the ownership is a lot more complex. There's a lot larger number of landowners and smaller parcels to deal with. And then Matt Davis was pointing out that Onyx has maybe degraded the precision of property boundaries. Like he's found this in Lake Ashtabula in North Dakota. And yeah, I'm not sure exactly about that, but I that kind of gets back to not treating Onyx as an authoritative source of information. Like I think we have to be really careful. It's a really nice entry point into looking at the landscape of ownership in your area, but Onyx is not the end all. It's really just the starting point. And Jaron is pointing out that if you report corrections to Onyx, they update it more quickly. I did not know that, but we have talked to their developers, and they seem to be, although they've grown exponentially, they seem to be a pretty responsive, smaller group of folks. So that's good to hear. And Joe from SHTA is asking, when surveys are needed, any estimate on what the cost on a per parcel basis is? I have no idea. Maybe Matt Davis does.
Matt Robotham, while Matt Davis is typing that answer to Joe, which I see just popped up. They spent $2,400 for a survey of a 2-mile segment. I saw a question in the other chat about suggestions for potentially obtaining landowner phone numbers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think phone numbers, that's, yeah, I don't know, because, generally all the data I've seen just has a property address. So I don't know if there's some best practices, Val, but, I guess one thought that occurs to me, and I know a phone number is pretty easy, but man, maybe kind of go old school and start out with a written letter to that mailing address, because most data has both the property address and the mailing address if the landowners don't live on the property. So maybe that's one way to go. But yeah, I would check with the regional trail coordinator from there. They may have other ideas on how to get contact with those folks.
Yeah, we've had a reasonable amount of success with letters. And Bruce, I see that question came from you. I know Kenny has written a lot of landowner letters, so I'm sure he has a template he'd be happy to share.
Yeah. And then Ryan is asking, any advice on how to get parcel information for counties that don't have it online? Yeah, for sure. That was our life up until, 5 or 6 years ago. So worst case scenario, worst case scenario, they just have some sort of paper map that they don't know where it came from. We can actually work with that. We can take a paper map and we can do what's called georeferencing, and we can bring it into our mapping system, and actually, if there's any sort of, if it has the public land survey sections, if you're in the part of the country that uses those, or if it has any sorts of roads or other geographic features on it, we can actually reshape the map and then locate it and use it in our mapping system. And we actually do that quite a bit still. Kind of the other stage between that and GIS is going to be having that information just in CAD and computer aided drafting. And GIS works pretty well with CAD data. So we could, request, the CAD data as well. So that's kind of addressing like the medium that the information might come in, but really the struggle comes with how do you get it? And especially if you want a lot of it, if you're not just going in and wanting 1 or 2 parcels, if you want a whole, township or something that's up for exploring for trail location. We've had the best success with making a contact at the county or whatever unit of government it might be that's very sympathetic to the NCTAs. So it's best if they have a recreation department, start with those folks and see if you have any sort of relationship you can build with the recreation folks. Often the community planners can be very sympathetic to the efforts, with trail building. So community planners or like any sort of like park and recreation staff is always a good way into the county. And then if that doesn't work, there's always the option to just pay their standard fee for it, if they do offer it, for a fee. Yep, Connie's pointing out, the plat maps. The plat maps are generally produced, by a company for like a large area. So I think there's a company that does like most of Wisconsin, the UP, maybe down even to northern lower Michigan. Like we've worked, seems to be like Red Barn plat maps or something like that. So we can work with that information and we can do some sketching based on that and kind of make that stuff work in GIS. Pretty much anything you can get us, we can make work. Yeah, so Kenny's pointing out the county clerk is the good resource, and like we kind of said earlier, he wasn't part of the presentation, but they're the authoritative source. So. Yeah, we have a good relationship with the planning department in Berry County, and then just got to know their GIS staff as well. So they've understood that the work we're doing, like in Berry County, Michigan, is helpful for the county. So they've been they've provided us great access to their information over the years. All right, any other pressing questions on property data? You've got Kenny Wazik on here now, who's hiked over large swaths of remote UP looking at, private forestry property and stuff like that. So he's got a lot of firsthand experience. All right, well, if we're good on private property questions, are there any general map questions at all? I don't know, Abby, if I should stop sharing my screen. I will. Okay, Ryan's asking, can you tell us the process you go through from the point we get a GPS track to you to when it's on the online map? Yeah, so we've taken what would be a simple, straightforward process and made it extremely complicated. Having those half-mile waypoints on, my goal with all of our mapping, all of our trail user maps, is to kind of meet users where they're at, to provide information that can be used on any medium of their choosing. So you can use paper maps, you can use your smartphone with the Avenza app, you can download the data and use it on your Garmin GPS device, things like that. So because of that, the marked half-mile points are kind of the things that synchronize everything together. You can use your paper map with your GPS device that way, type thing. So that's really the challenge. Any edit to a state line means I have to re-update the half-mile points. So in Ryan's case, in Ohio, we don't have, we have 2 separate maps. One's published in the eastern part of the state, and then we'll be publishing the map set in his area fairly soon here. But you know, it's not as big of a deal because you're kind of self-contained. But whereas in Michigan, if we have one little reroute, it changes the half-mile points for the entire state. So what we've tried to do is kind of, you know, wait till we get a number of them. But you know, the system does have the flexibility. Any significant update that we have, we can publish the map. So we just have to make that clear. Make sure you're making that clear to me or to the regional trail coordinator that, hey, this is like a big deal. We need maps updated for it. And that's something my goal is to be able to, you know, turn those around in those instances. And then Matt Davis was asking, where do you see hiking maps being in 5 years, 10 years? I think, I don't know. I think if someone at Google realizes that they're interested in hiking and just wants to do some like nationwide aggregation of hiking trails, I think I think that'll eventually happen. There'll be just some ubiquitous Google Maps style app that has, for better or worse, you know, everything on it. And you know, that sounds kind of like challenging to get a ton of trails put into one data set. But if you look at like OpenStreetMaps, which is all user derived data, they have like a ton of stuff in there. So I don't know, I guess that's where I see it, is kind of like one big player like Google kind of, you know, making Google Maps trails or something like that.
Matt, there are 2 questions that kind of go together, one in the Q&A and one in the chat. You know, Jan asked about, can you kind of just walk us through the general process for, you know, reaching out for help from staff? Like, you know, should they go to the RTC first?
Yeah.
Or, you know, where to start? And then Peter asked a question that kind of goes with that, which was, you know, he was saying they need to map a spur trail. And do you have an app that you prefer, you know, getting the data from, you know, the people on the ground to you? So I guess those kind of flow together in my brain.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely. Yeah. Now that we have full RTC coverage across the trail, that's definitely the starting point for any of this stuff, whether it be, you know, planning new trail or correcting something that we have with existing trail wrong. So definitely bring the RTC in. I definitely talk to volunteers. I try to CC the RTCs in almost any conversation I have. So you all may see that, like, I'll just throw them on as a CC just to keep them in the loop. But I definitely talk one-on-one with a ton of volunteers across the trail. But because of that, it is useful that you loop your RTC in, because they know that little segment of trail and what the issue is with it, and they can help me prioritize where that fits into everything that we're doing. So that would be, I'm just reading her questions. Yeah, definitely bring the RTCs in on route planning. And we really have, you know, we can produce like those project type maps. The RTCs can produce those. So those are really useful for like working with a landowner or partner out in the field. We have other templates, you know, that are 2 foot by 3 foot, that are really useful for laying out on a table and marking up with you know, markers of different people's ideas. And the RTCs can make any of that stuff happen real quickly. So and then Peter was asking about the best way to get the information to us. That really hasn't changed. You know, the GPX file format is still the best. I would say like emailable or transferable file format out there. So whether you're doing that with a Garmin GPS receiver or Gaia GPS is an app for smartphones that's gaining a lot of momentum. So I think we'll hear a lot more about that in the future as well. Those would be my 2 choices. Avenza also has GPS recording functionality, and that's actually gotten a lot better inside of that app since it came out. So that's a great tool to use as well. But yeah, ultimately just ending up with a GPX file that you can email. We get KML files, the Google Earth format, all the time, and those generally work pretty good. I feel like, although fundamentally it's the same data, I feel like GPX is just a little bit cleaner.
Matt, Connie had a suggestion that maybe you could pull up our online map and go over some of the features and attributes that you can see.
Yeah,
I'll just add that maybe we can share, I don't know if we've shared in this format at least, some of the new stuff we're doing with trail alerts and how we're posting those along the map.
yeah, good idea. All right, let me try to share my screen. I saw you got Jaren's question. Yeah, so the map behind me is a guy in Minnesota, Keith Mermel, I believe it is. He did a series of these. This is a hand painted watercolor map. It's a print, but he did a series for the Spear Hiking Trail, and then he's done this for the North Country Trail. So it's a pretty cool map. I just got this a couple weeks ago, and with vacations and stuff, I haven't had a chance to really dig into it. But yeah, it's pretty cool. It's a piece of North Country Trail wall art, which we're all always fans of. It's interesting. He split it here in northern Lower Michigan, as you can see. So it's a two-sided print. So if you wanted to you could kind of do like a cool, you could get two of them and frame each side of it and like kind of hang them, in the correct orientation to each other and make a cool display on your wall. Okay, so I'm trying to share my screen. All right, so coming into northcountrytrail.org, go to the trail maps and downloads. This is our kind of landing page for all thing maps, and we'll be growing and evolving this over time. But it almost, in my mind, is like a 1, 2, 3 thing too. So the first part is the online map. I think the online map is a great tool for exploring the trail. Maybe it's the only tool you need to hike if you're down here around Grand Rapids or another area with guaranteed cell coverage. If you're just going out and doing a couple mile day hike, it's a great resource for that. You can bring it up in your phone. And I will say, initially when we started with this, I was pushing the app that this company offers called Explorer, and that's a fine tool. But I realized you can actually just bring this up in your phone's browser, and you're there in a lot less clicks. I have noticed, like on an iPhone, I would use the Safari browser. That seems to work a little better. But yeah, you get all this functionality, and it's adaptive to mobile screen size. So it becomes something. Everything you're going to see right here, you can do in the field. You have to have data signal on your phone's browser. So Val was mentioning trail alerts, so I'll go to that first. This is kind of a new thing we've launched. So we're including these icons for any sort of substantial closures or big notices, with information we think we need to communicate to the public. We're putting in this trail alerts layer, so that's available in the online map. And then from there, the way I use this is just is really hike planning. So this is in my neck of the woods, actually. So if I wanted to come down here, where might I want to park? I think I'd park, here. And then if I'm going to go, backpacking, I want to know what I can do on the trail here. So I might click that. Here's some information about camping. It shows that this allows dispersed camping. It's open year round. Okay, that's good to know. And it's open to bikes. So that might, influence, the decision that you make about what you're going to do there or the experience that you want to have. And that's available in general for a lot of the trail line. There are going to be areas where we just don't have that information filled in, and you're welcome to send that in to either me or your RTC if you know that. I will tell you that I like that to be objective information. So even if this section is closed to horses, the best thing you could send me is the like the land manager's documentation that says no horses allowed or something like that. That would make it best for us. But yeah, so there's a bunch of information available in the trail line. And then you've got the half-mile waypoints, or how you can kind of estimate your mileage. Although there are mileages in each segment, the segments are they're not arbitrary. They're based on the changes in these attributes, but they're not going to be that helpful for hiking. So your best way to do mileage is to look at the half-mile waypoints and kind of estimate how far you want to go. And then, you know, the main way I use this, and it's often sitting in my car with the car running, still trying to use the Wi-Fi at my house right before we leave, is I'll, you know, pull this up on my phone, click on the parking area, and then I'll go to Google Maps driving directions and hit more info. And that'll allow you to actually generate driving directions right from your location to the trailhead. I did a video this end of the winter kind of talking a little bit about this. You know, Google is, I don't know, it's really weird lately. I think it's doing this thing where if it can save you 30 seconds by taking you off like a main road and putting you on these crazy back roads, it'll do it. So use common sense and your best judgment with that stuff. Like if there's a main road that gets you where you want to go, take the main road. Unless you've got the vehicle to handle who knows what. It had us recently in Gaylord, you know, getting from the Traverse City area to I-75, and it had us like, there's absolutely no reason to be off these main roads, and it had taken us into some crazy 2 tracks. It was just, everyone in my, you know, family was just laughing about how ridiculous the situation was. So just be very aware of, you know, Google is not focused on road conditions at all. It is a computer system that's focused on the fastest route. So that's really the online map. I hope to, I think the biggest, so right now the link between the online map and the rest of our mapping resources are really these half-mile waypoints. I hope in the near future to have, basically you'll see kind of like semi-transparent outlines of the PDF hiking maps. So that'll help you better locate your PDF hiking maps that you might need. And those will be available right on the online map. We added, oops, not this one, I think. We added a layer that was pretty popular this winter, the snow depth analysis. So again, this winter that'll be on there. And I've been looking for other neat layers we could add. There's like a wildfires layer and things like that. So we'll continue to add and build functionality into the online map. But once you kind of figure out where you're going, then you would jump down, and in my opinion, you should print the maps. And the key with these is this date system right here. So this date is on each individual map. So if you have maps already printed at home, you want to make sure that they say the same date as the website, or if not, then you're going to want to run new ones. And because of the nature of the North Country Trail, they're kind of sporadic updates. And the weird thing about it is it seems to be like we're planning updates a couple times a year, but then we're doing like back-to-back updates, because we'll put updates out and it's either like we get some late information or something just happens to change that's really substantial. So I wouldn't like print every map for the state. I would just print what you need as you need it type thing. And I guess my other biggest surprise with this whole thing is because we offer these PDF maps in the Avenza Maps app for your phone, people are skipping right over this constantly. They're just, I see it, you know, we have a pretty robust online community on Facebook, you know, folks talking about this stuff all the time. And it's just like, because we do offer an app version, everyone assumes that you need to go with the app version, and you really don't. I mean, this was just a happy accident that this system came along at the same time we were offering these PDF maps. So for me, it's like planning with the online map, primary navigation with the printable PDF maps, and then supplemental navigation with either the Avenza app, or you can download the half-mile waypoints to your like Garmin GPS receiver. Yeah, Joe's saying Google's not taking into account private lands and things like that. Yeah, on the we have the same thing, Joe, in the UP, like up going from basically Quamanon Falls State Park to the Two-Hearted, mouth of the Two-Hearted campground. there's some private roads, and Google is like insistent that you take these private roads because they're, like quicker to get to the place you're going. And the landowners have put up very, substantial signs. Obviously, like it's Google's taking everyone that route. So yeah, it's an interesting phenomenon with Google Maps. It's like you have these transportation planners that have laid out these road networks in these communities, and it seems Google Maps has just disregarded that completely. And they're reshaping how traffic flows through communities. Oh, Connie was asking about the key on the map. Yeah, I think little used. Let me go back to sharing. So, yeah, I always feel, I wish I could do a better job of, like, we can put like a splash screen that comes up when you launch the map. And I've often thought that we should maybe do that and explain that there's all these different tools up here. So the share tool, absolutely useful. We use this all day long at NCTA. Everyone does, all the RTCs. So we're constantly sending, this map link is exactly what you're zoomed into. So we're constantly sending each other these links back and forth. So that's very useful. The print tool is even useful. I guess I would use our printed maps because there's other information, like we might have a corrected road name on our PDF maps that we can't do to this online mapping system. So I guess I personally wouldn't print, but I know folks do print stuff here and kind of make custom maps. The measure tool is extremely useful. Not so much in the line measurement because we have the half-mile points, but the coordinate measurements, you can take a GPS coordinate anywhere you want on the trail, or anywhere for that matter on the map. So that's an extremely useful tool. And then you can switch it to different formats. And then, yeah, beyond useful is the different base maps that they offer. So here we'll look at the suspension bridge here real quick. So, oh yeah, this looks okay. Look, there's a river and, some hills, no big deal, right? No, it's a crazy area. It's like pretty dramatic hills. You've got this really substantial bridge across this very substantial river, So, a totally different impression that you get when you look at the satellite imagery. And then, like I was talking about, OpenStreetMaps is an extremely useful resource, although none of it is authoritative. So this is all user created information, but it really does have a lot of information. In general, you just can't, if it shows, for example, if it shows a road in this forest, I wouldn't, count on it. If like the Forest Service, you have to look at the authoritative source. Like if the Forest Service says it's not a road, but OpenStreetMap says it's a road, it's not a road, even if it exists on the ground. They're the managing authority of that. So you have to keep that stuff in mind. And then the USGS national map is also very good. I'm using that more and more. And then the old USGS topographical maps are on here, which of course are the most useful, although they're out of date, but you can see they're just great maps. And then, yeah, we do, have sort of a layer list here, so you can turn things on and off. And then there is like a legend that kind of explains what each, symbol represents on the map. Looks like Matt's saying Google Maps is open to us suggesting they add new recreational features like NCT trails that aren't already on there. Okay. Yeah, that's probably good to do, and it would be, yeah, because if we're not adding it in there, it's going to end up, some other way, and we have maybe the best direction to give them. So.
Matt, did you see downloads of our PDF maps go up in the past year, or have you seen any trends that are noteworthy in how many people are using maps?
Yeah, we had a little bit of a hiccup in our tracking system when we switched website platforms on the back end. But the one thing that I'd say, always when we sold maps, we always sold Manistee National Forest and Allegheny National Forest, just heads and tails above all the rest. And then when we started downloads, kind of at the same time we started Hike 100, our like urban areas just, I mean, like we would get in whatever time period it was, there were like 7,000 downloads for Manistee and Allegheny. There was 14,000 for West Michigan, which is just these county parks and game areas. So that was really surprising. It was really representing like a change in use along the trail. But then the most recent stuff I've looked at has gone exactly back to Manistee and Allegheny, or the #1 downloads and our popular areas in the UP, Wisconsin, stuff like that. So it seems, I don't know if Hike 100 brought a bunch of new folks in that use trail in their kind of backyard type situation, and now with the again increase and change in use patterns, if people are now just hitting those popular recreation spots again, I would guess that's what that kind of indicates. So Peter's saying he's spent some time trying to improve things on Google, so that is appreciated. Yeah, he's talking about a common protocol for labeling trailheads. Yeah, the one thing, just there are many North Country trailheads, so obviously that would be something we have control over. And then in other places we just are on like a land manager's trail, it might be multi trails that are served from that, so we would just call them what the land manager calls them. Would be how they're signed is even better, making sure that what's on the map matches the sign on the ground. We do not have any plans. Connie's asking if NCTA chapters should work with Google individually, or if the NCTA would work comprehensively with them. We don't have any plans to work comprehensively with them right now. I've talked to them years, things change so fast with them, but I've talked to them a few years ago about correcting some things, and they just sent me the user tools that you make one change at a time. So yeah, if individuals want to do that, that would be great for now. All right, well, we've got about 4 minutes left. Did I get all the questions, you think, Val?
I think that was all of them that I saw.
Okay. Yeah, I guess, my soapbox right now is just encourage folks to use the printable maps. And I mean, I'm not talking about people who are comfortable using technology. I think we hear a lot of, not frustrated, but folks that just aren't that comfortable with technology, kind of fumbling around with it, trying to make it work when they have this printable option available at their fingertips, and it seems to just get missed because of this like technological solution that's also available. So that's kind of where I'm at. I'd like to see folks just encourage people to use the paper maps more often. They do have a UTM grid on it, so if you're if you're a traditional map and compass user, they have the information to do that. But then the other neat resources, you can just use them with the half-mile waypoints. But I guess that's a pretty techie solution, so scratch that. But yeah, and I've been out, especially this summer, on a bunch of trail, and it's so well marked in most cases. I think we can not have to be completely dependent on our smartphones while we're out there. I mean, we made it this far in history without them. So
Matt, do you have any good recommendations for a easy to use quality GPS?
if you have an Apple phone, I think Gaia GPS is a really great resource to look into. They're doing a lot with the hiking community. They have a lot of great resources, outside of the NCT available at their subscription level. So I would look at like an Apple phone, and Gaia GPS is a really good modern solution. If not, I'm into like the bike packing world and the long distance hiking world and dog sledding world. There's tons of folks traversing thousands of miles of remote dangerous, rugged country with Garmin e-Trex and, you know, just the simple Garmins that you can buy anywhere for $100 or $120. So those are still totally valid options. Nothing's changed there. You know, Garmin's a great brand. I will say that the InReach devices, like I don't know who owns what now, but those are limited. Those are a tool for, like, although they have navigation functionality with them, they are a tool for like communication and a safety, you know, bailout type tool. So a number of folks, when those really hit the market at an affordable price point, I was getting a lot of folks saying, oh, I can only put like 50 it wasn't 50, but I can extremely limited number of waypoints I can load onto this, like, you know, a workaround for that. And that's just the way that product was set up at the time. So I would just be cautious of that. If you want to load a bunch of information on it, make sure it can handle what you want to load onto it. So that was kind of the reason we developed the half-mile waypoints, is it's a very simplified data set. If you just had the half-mile waypoints, you'd be fine hiking the entire North Country Trail with a Garmin and the half-mile waypoints. It's, you know, it's not like you're traversing remote backcountry or anything like that. It's generally a well-marked trail. So. Oh, Gaia GPS. Yeah, let me, Val, can you pull up a link to Gaia GPS for me? Yeah, Peter's saying the interactive map is a big part of what connects us together. Thanks for your work. Yeah, you're welcome. I appreciate it. It's a great tool. And I hope to do, there's so much more we can do with it. So I hope to keep expanding the functionality. And we are not opposed to copying what other people do. So if you see any of the other trail organizations do something cool, let me know, because it's like, that's where that snow layer came from. It's literally just a click of a button. You know, I think PCTA, they threw that up on their online map, and it's like, oh, we have that too. So, yep. Well, cool. Can we add photos to the interactive map? We tried to, we thought about it. I mean, I have a whole library of Ruth and Dan Doro's photos that are geographically located. We'll see if we need them up there at some point. I thought it was going to be a great idea, and then I don't know, it didn't turn out to be that great of an idea, but it's possible. Yeah, we'll see. Yeah, Ryan uses Gaia GPS and likes it, so good. Yeah, they're really pushing the long distance hiking community, so I think we'll work a little bit more with them in the future too. So. All right, well, if that's it, we could try to even end it on almost time.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Matt and Val, for your help today on today's presentation about maps. As a reminder, we have a couple more events with our virtual celebration. Tonight at 7 p.m. Eastern, we are going to be joined by John Stephen, and he's going to be discussing the Rachel Carson Loop, closing gaps, creating visions, and building dreams. If you're unable to make that tonight, don't forget we do record all of these, and then our last event will be held Wednesday at 7 p.m. Eastern, which will be our NCTA awards. So we hope you can join us for our last two events. But again, thank you, Matt and Val, for your time this afternoon. And I hope you all have a wonderful afternoon. Matt, anything else?
No, thanks a lot.
All right, thank you. Bye.